Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 46 of
Don't Die Dumb.
Now, if it's okay with you, I know you have a list of topics here, but I wanted to handle questions and comments.
Yes. In fact, I wanted to return to one of the previous comments.
Okay. Is there one you want to hit first?
Yeah. Somebody had written in, well, are you actually saying a janitor should make as much as a CEO? And we talked a little bit about that last time, but I want to return to that. First of all, I never did say anything that should have sounded like that. But second of all, I looked at, remember, we're talking about a living wage being what it takes for one person to live above the poverty line as a standard of living in that area in that year. And currently, that would mean if you were in New York, working 40 hours a week, it would take about $55,000 a year to be just above the poverty line. And by that I mean standard of living. But if you're in a small town, you might get there at $13,000 a year. So it's very possible that a janitor in New York would and should earn more than a CEO in a small town. The other thing I said was that in most of the world, the gap between the most and worst paid, the highest and lowest paid person in a company is 10 to 20 fold. In the US, it can be 10,000 fold. So I already said the CEO would be making 10 to 20 times what the janitor is making. And if the CEO cannot afford to pay the janitor a living wage, then he cannot afford a janitor. He hasn't made it far enough to hire a janitor. He's just going to have to clean up his own damn shit.
Now, I want to start out with a good comment, and let me run on this one. Said, it's great to see two old guys still doing it and still acting up socially. Yeah, I am an old guy. I'm an old man, and that's okay. I don't mind it. I don't appreciate some 26-year-old guy reminding me of it as if I don't know, you know? The bags under my head are so big, I look like a short butcher peeping over two lamb chops, okay? I get enough wrinkles in my forehead to hold a 3-day rain. The hair on the back of my head is slowly migrating somehow down to my shoulders. Get that. Now I'm growing barbed wire out of my ears that can only be cut by some surgical implement I've never seen, and my butt looks like a canoe. Okay, I get it, and that's okay. And by the way, thanks for the compliment. That was good. Now let's move on to something that wasn't complimentary. You two are both just a bunch of commies, and you're trying to promote communism in America. But it is... I'm not a member of the Communist Party. Okay. I'm not a member of the Communist Party. I am a member of the Democratic Party. And what's happening now, there's a branding that conservatives are doing to liberals, any minority, and of course Democrats. They're trying to say democratic socialism is communism. Can you tell people what the difference is?
Yeah, there's a pretty big difference. Communism and socialism are not the same thing. Moreover, in the American mind, all communism is Marxism. I am absolutely anti-Marxist. The pogroms that Stalin and Mao carried out are actually in the script of the Marxist Manifesto. But not all communism is Marxism. Communes are communism. Nevertheless, I'm also not a communist, which is about little or no ownership of personal belongings. Socialism is pooling resources for social goods that cannot or would not be accomplished by the private sector. You, the person that wrote that line, are a socialist. If you think we should have publicly funded police and fire departments and military.
And post office.
To the extent that we have public utilities, and you definitely could not, we couldn't sustain this country if everybody had to have their own private well, or if everybody had to build their own private power grid, and so forth. So there are certain things we have to act together on. And to the extent that you endorse any of those, even if it's only the military, you are a socialist. So the debate should be, which things should we pool our resources on and which should we not? And that's a legitimate debate, and liberals probably would want more programs and conservatives would probably want less. But the current debate is not between liberals and conservatives, it's between democracy and a dictatorship, a literal dictatorship. The discussion about what we should share the expenses for, that's where the conversation should be. And using cartoon labels like socialist or communist is just a retarded way of avoiding the discussion completely. Unless you want zero taxes, zero services, and therefore zero security, you, my friend, are a socialist. You're just not as socialist as the next guy.
And let me say, I think you should be very cautious of people that throw around derogatory statements. There's a lazy Mexican. There's another fag. There's a liberal commie. There's a conservative fascist. Be careful of that. Okay, I don't say I don't promote the hate. I really don't like the hate speech. But be very careful if anybody is quick to label people derogatory. If you look for the bad in something, you're bound to find it. Now, here's a good comment. I appreciate that. We appreciate it. I love your health advice, although you do push diet and exercise a lot. I have friends that the only exercise they do is hiking and walking, and they're in great shape.
That's great exercise. In fact, I think we talked a lot about that last time. Mm-hmm. That's almost the best that you can do. I heartily endorse that. When I say exercise, the problem is what people hear is, oh, I should do what those Marvel actors do to get in shape for the movie studio. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just talking about movement and moderately increased respiration and heart rate for 30 minutes a day. And any form that you enjoy, whether it's pickleball, hiking, going for a walk, take your dog to the dog park, but walk around the whole time you're there. You're right. I will always push diet and exercise because that's what works the best. And for all of us, there will come a time when that's not enough. I tried to fix a problematic joint for more than half a year with exercise and physical therapy. It's going to need surgery. Okay, but at least I know that I tried to use the Cadillac path first.
Now, I know some elderly people that are a bit overweight and they just barely walk around. So I met this woman that was a bit overweight and she looked a lot better. And I said, boy, you look healthy, good for you. I said, are you doing something different? She said, I did one thing different. When I go to the market, when I go to the convenience store, when I go shopping, when I go to Salvation Army or Goodwill, I don't park close. I park at the other end of the parking lot. I walk in. That's how I do. I said, really? She goes, yeah. And I did. Suddenly I realized how often I'm getting more steps in. And you don't have to get a pedometer to know it, right?
And it feels good too. But I will say, whomever wrote that comment, first of all, thank you very much for that. Send in questions about what you would like me to go do homework on, what you'd like me to come back to you. I like to do explainer stuff, and medicine, of course, is my happy place. So if there are medical questions you'd like me to take on, I'm looking for material. I'd be happy to do that.
The next one I'm going to clean up. Because we talk about controversial subjects, people get pretty worked up about it. And sometimes they assume things, and this is an assumption. You two freaking a-holes are just anti-religious atheists spewing ungodly thoughts. Okay, number one, I come here each week after going to church.
Pete was in church an hour ago. Yeah.
So I'm not anti-religion, but I think there's a big breakdown between organized religion and spiritualism. And understand this, when people hear spiritualism, they think of meeting a guru in India somewhere or being in a cult. No, explain religion versus spiritualism, if you would. in your opinion. And these are just our opinions. But trust me, I have nothing against religion. I'm not an atheist, and I'm not. I have a brother who's an agnostic, and people used to get down on him, but now they realize he's just saying, "I'm not sure what God is. I believe there might be a God, but I'm not sure what it is."
So first of all, yes, I am an atheist, hardcore. I don't need you to agree with me in order for me to feel comfortable with that. And I don't need you to agree with me in order to feel comfortable with you. Why do you need me to agree with you, or else I'm an antichrist? Like, what is the insecurity there? Okay? If you believe what you believe it. Believe it. I got no problem with that. Everybody I know thinks something differently than I think. And if you're not able to be comfortable with people who see the world differently than you do, the problem is you, buddy. That said, I would say religion is when you think there's a specific personal higher power, a personal higher power, meaning an intelligence or an individual. Whereas spiritualism is more the idea that there is an intrinsic good and bad in the universe that you're trying to understand and coordinate with. But I will say I've struggled with that word myself. How would you define those two things?
Spiritualism is the act of wanting to do good and to be good. Religion is an organized set of rules that is used sometimes to control you.
I would like to think that if it turns out I'm terribly mistaken, and after I die I'm going to run into Jesus or Allah or some other entity, they won't say, "Why didn't you do good things in my name?" They will say, "Wow, you did good things even though you weren't afraid of punishment and you weren't hoping for a reward."
There's a big push for evangelicals, and I forget what it's called, Christian nationalism. And when people ask me, "Well, why don't you support the president?" I can't tell my nieces and my girlfriend and my sister, I can't tell them, "Hey, you got to support this guy. He's been convicted of sexual assault, and he's mentioned 35,000 times in a pedophile ring."
Don't forget the 35 felonies he's been convicted of.
Yeah, but I can't justify that. So, and I know many evangelicals and religious people supported the president because he made abortion illegal in many states. Okay, you got what you wanted. Maybe it's time to say he's not a holy man. Often I've heard, I just want you to think about that. I'm not trying to influence you. Just think about that idea that maybe he's not what you think he is.
Now, he just pardoned a woman who was sentenced to prison for the felony of election tampering.
Yeah, fraud.
And he pardoned her, and she came out, and she's attempting to prove election fraud. Ironically, she has indeed proven election fraud.
She's guilty of it.
By committing it, yeah. So good on you. Good on you. It's an interesting way to prove a crime, but there you are.
Here's one that is more positive. I like your environmental advice. I like the things you tell us about the environment. 87% of the American people say they'd gladly pay more taxes for clean air and clean water, but we can't seem to get it. Is there something each person can do to improve that?
I often wonder what people mean when they tell me, "I love my children, but I hate sustainability." You realize they're going to have to live on this planet after you're gone, right? And they're going to have to live on whatever resources you leave behind. So why, what does it mean to say you love your children if you're not willing to make any sacrifices at all in the name of protecting the environment? And honestly, I'm not sure you do have to make sacrifices, because for much less than the cost of the Iran war, let alone all of our recent Middle Eastern adventures, we could actually have turned this around. We know we have the technologies to counteract climate change, and for that matter, overpopulation. But we're not using them for any of those things. And all we would have had to do is like stay out of Iran, and the money we saved there would have paid for everything we need to do. So even the sacrifices needn't be huge sacrifices.
There was an implant called the Norplant, and it got a lot of bad press, and they got rid of it. But I often thought you should have every young woman over the age of 16 pay them $5,000 toward college if they'll get the Norplant implant until they're 20. Now, religious people are really against it. They say it'll promote promiscuity. Well, if you raise your daughter right, she's either promiscuous or she's not, that's up to her. But that doesn't promote promiscuity, just keeps them from getting pregnant and sentencing them to 18 years of servitude to a child they may or may not want. I think that might be a good thing to promote that. And your thoughts, you're a doctor, you know better than me about the Norplant.
Well, okay, since we're putting this back on medical ground, there are a couple of interesting things to know here. One is that in order of the likelihood that it will kill you, pregnancy is riskier than abortion, and abortion is riskier than birth control, and birth control is riskier than being born male. So pregnancy is not safer than birth control alternatives. Even the most drastic one, which is abortion, pregnancy is not safer than that, even though all of them occasionally have bad outcomes.
There should be a national referendum on abortion and only let women vote. And go with that for 10 years, do the referendum again.
No, we couldn't do that because that would imply that women own their own bodies. In fact, it would be tantamount to treating them like human beings, as if they were citizens.
You mock me, young man. No, it'd be a good idea. Why? I hear all these men say, well, I should have a say in it too. No. Did your wife have a say in you for circumcision?
Would these be the same men who resent child support payments?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just checking.
So, anyhow, that would be my thought on it. Have a national referendum, but only let women vote. Men want to get involved after the fact because they have that parental instinct to take care of their kids.
Do they, though?
In some cases, yes.
We know that 80% of child care is still on women.
Yeah, but I know guys that say, if I lost my kids, I don't know how I could go on.
Oh, they want to own them, but that's not the same as taking care of them. I've always wanted a bonsai tree, too, but do you know what it takes to cultivate one of those?
Okay, I'm going to move on to another negative subject. You two know-it-alls are trying to push your political views on everybody. Coffee has said over and over again, we're not trying to tell you what to think. We're trying to get you to think about sometimes controversial subjects and some subjects that shouldn't be controversial. And I feel the same way. I'm not trying to make you think so much. I just want you to hear what I'm saying and decide for yourself from that and disprove me. If you can disprove me about these things, write it in, tell us, send me an email, that's fine.
I think this goes back a little bit to the atheism question. The fact that we might have a different perspective than you doesn't mean we're insisting you agree with us. It means we're asking you to think about why we might have that perspective. It could lead to you sending us a reason we should change our minds, or it could lead to you rethinking some of the stuff you've taken for granted, which is the heart and soul of critical thinking. You're not a critical thinker if you can tear apart my arguments. You're a critical thinker if you can tear apart your arguments. If you're not stress testing your own beliefs, then yes, we would like you to open your mind. But it doesn't necessarily mean you'll conclude what we have concluded.
Okay, here's one that's positive. I love your podcast, but why aren't you on more forums? That one's on me. I was very computer literate during 2000 to 2010 when I was working for a TV station. After that, I went into performing more and acting. And what happened is the advancements were so fast, I didn't keep up with them. So I'm learning it now, and I'm going to try and get us on more formats. But that's totally on me. Now, here's one a bit more negative. And don't joke around. Don't be cynical on this one.
Okay. All right.
And you never talk about sex. You two are a couple of, and I'm cleaning this up, homo bastages. And I cleaned up the wordage there. No, we're not. He was in a wonderful relationship for
That will
most of your
come as
life.
a tremendous shock to my wife,
Yeah.
I must say. Although that does happen, so not that funny.
No,
All right.
but don't joke around.
I'm
Because then
not.
people want. And I'm in a relationship. I've been in many relationships.
With
Some
women.
of them even worked. Yeah, with women. But let me say this: the hate and name calling. I don't want to be bedroom police. I don't care what the guy next to me is doing or the woman next to me is doing. And I've found I got a friend that's gay. I've known him since I was 15. He thinks I don't know. I figured it out. But the fact that he thinks I don't know, and after over a half a century, he's never told me, shows you what persecution he's under. And also, that's a statement on me because he doesn't trust me to be understanding. I'm tired of the hate. I don't want to hate Muslims. I don't want to hate Hispanics. And you Hispanics that are down on other Hispanics coming here because their children will be forced into drug addiction or prostitution. I'm so let down by you. But no, we're not gay, but go ahead. And the hate talk is what bothers me a lot.
I'm a little surprised at the comment that we must be gay because we don't talk about sex. Is it literally the case that every single podcast has to talk about sex? It just hasn't really been the thing that we think we're here for.
And do you really want to hear two old guys talking about
Yeah, it
sex?
could cause you to have mental images you
Or
might never get
throw your
over,
lunch, you know?
You might need therapy afterward. But I will say that I like medical and scientific questions the best. And if there are topics related to sex that you would like us to talk about, send in questions. So one reason we haven't talked about sex is nobody's expressed interest in topics about sex. Nor do I necessarily feel like I have the kind of expertise that like Stoya has or something. But yeah,
Well, let
absolutely.
me tell you about expertise. I
Yeah,
know.
well, let me just
I've been rejected by more women. Oh, well, I guess it doesn't count. But no, you make a valid point. If it's in the medical field, or if we talked about, say, sexuality in cinema, I could talk about that, or sexuality in the female comedians and that nature. I wouldn't mind talking about how crude comics have become that don't have talent.
right.
The material and and things of that nature. But and we will, let's do that. We'll just take one podcast, just talk about sex.
For example, Eddie Murphy, I think, is a brilliant comedian. But when Eddie Murphy is in prime time, when he's out in a public broadcast kind of context, family friendly, I think he's way, way funnier than he is when he's on HBO. Because on HBO, he falls back on sex jokes and taboo language.
Every adjective begins with F.
Years ago, I saw an interview with a person whose job was to be a clown at kids' parties. And they asked this person, well, what kind of jokes do you tell little children? And the clown said, it depends on their age. If they're toddlers, I say poo-poo, and they all start giggling. It doesn't matter what the rest of the sentence was. As soon as they hear poo-poo, they start giggling. And then when they're a little bit older, I'll say underpants, and they'll all start giggling and stuff. And I realized that when Eddie Murphy doesn't have a censor, he falls back on poo-poo and underpants. But when Eddie Murphy has to clean up, he falls back on actual thoughtful humor, and he is brilliant. He doesn't need poo-poo and underpants to be funny, but he falls back on it if he gets the opportunity. Sorry, Mr. Murphy, by the way. And I'd be happy to have you comment on that. but that's how it strikes me.
Okay, we've got time to answer one more question, and this one is it's thoughtful, and it's not negative or positive. Simply, sometimes you touch on UFOs. What are the odds that there are UFOs? Number one, and number two, have we found a galaxy other than our own? Do we have proof that there's another galaxy?
So that is a great question for us, particularly because Pete and I are on different pages about that. I think it's a near certainty that there is lots and lots of other life out there in the galaxy, let alone other galaxies. The way that life begins and the constituents that it needs and so forth are just abundant in our galaxy. So it would be astonishing to me if it weren't full of life. But it doesn't lead me to think that we've been visited by UFOs for a couple of reasons. And I want to see what you do with this. So I want to get through the reasons. One of them is space is really, really big. And we don't think, there's no physics theory that would allow for faster than light travel. Number two, we live out on the outer fringes of the galaxy. So for alien life to come and visit us and examine us would be like a New Yorker going to a small town in Idaho to look at the grass. And they might. I mean, anthropologists do that, zoologists do that, things like that. So maybe there are species that are curious enough to come out and take a look at us. But the third and most compelling reason is, if you had the power to travel faster than light, if you could cross whole galaxies, and you came across a planet so savage that they murder their own people all day, every day, and so overpopulated that they're going to actually end their own environment, and they just keep on going, would you consider that intelligent life, and would you ever allow them to get off the planet? Or would you be horrified and want to exterminate the cockroaches?
Sitting Bull said, when asked about the Europeans coming into his land, he told his people, I just know two things about them. They're terribly greedy and more violent than any tribe I've ever met. Now, I don't have time to go into the things that would back up the possibility of us visiting by UFOs, but there's a documentary where Dan Aykroyd sits in a hotel room and just talks about UFOs, all the instances that he has. He's just talking for an hour. And the producer went out and got film to back up everything he said, and the Roswell Museum in Roswell, New Mexico. You visit that, and you watch the Aykroyd documentary, and I'm fairly sure if it doesn't change your mind, it will make you consider it.
But if we are being visited by UFOs, what does that change? We still have to deal with things like the environment, which is not a political problem, it's a physics problem. We still have to deal with things like overpopulation, which is not a political problem, it's a math problem. We still have to deal with things like looking for reasons to hate each other rather than looking for reasons to work cooperatively. So how would knowing that UFOs do or do not exist, well, UFOs exist. We see things in the sky, we don't know what they are, that's an unidentified flying object. What we're really talking about is alien visitations. How would knowing that we are or are not being visited by aliens change anything important?
The person that asked this question, the woman that asked this question, I don't think that matters to her. I think what matters to her is she's got a curiosity and want to know if we could help her with that.
Oh, I'd be super fascinated and curious. There's a thing called the Drake equation that you can easily look up, just Wikipedia it. And it's basically like, if there's this much chance of life beginning, and there's this many stars, and each star has this many planets, and this percentage of them are habitable, and the universe is this old, then what are the chances of a civilization, and of the ones that have life, this percentage of them would go on to develop technology that we would recognize as being technologically advanced life. And you can set those percentages, those likelihoods, really, really low. Nobody knows what they are, but you can set them really, really low. But the numbers you're multiplying by are so huge, it won't matter. There's still got to be billions of inhabited planets out there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to wrap with this. last time I went to the planetarium, the professor that was giving the lecture said there are 800 million stars in our galaxy alone. The idea that none of them could support life, I don't know. In any event, and this is no big one, you've been watching Don't Die Dumb. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember,
Don't
don't die
die dumb.
dumb.